Welcome back. This week we're doing something a little different this week, Charles, for the next 3 weeks actually. And I wanted to ask you, what is it we're doing and how are you feeling about it?
It's up to me, huh? Okay. You engineered this, so I feel like you should be the one who talks about it. But we are talking about Lightyear, the Pixar movie that came out earlier this year, but it's Lightyear in relation to largely the Mission Impossible movies and the action genre in general. This was just such an awesome chat. But maybe you can speak to more was that a good summary? Maybe
I think that's great. I think that I became buddies with Angus MacLane. He will tell the story in this first episode, and he was a fan of the show, as was Jeremy Lasky, who is one of the cinematographers for Lightyear. And so, I said, well, let's do Lightyear the Fuse. Let's put the Pixar movie, through the lens of Mission Impossible. And I think you and I were both just very surprised at what a robust conversation it was.
Yeah.
And how we really did keep to Mission Impossible for almost the entire hour and a half, which is really interesting. So,
and Angus is like an action movie scholar.
Yes.
So it's just amazing to hear him talk about action movies in general and how they influenced Lightyear and how in particular the Mission Impossible movies influenced Lightyear.
Yeah, it was. I thought this was great. We always talk about how sometimes we are surprised, not surprised in a bad way or a negative way, but just we thought maybe we would get them on for a half hour or an hour to talk about it, and it ended up being 90 minutes. And just so much fun. And these guys are absolutely wonderful. We love them to death. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I want to plug also, Angus directed probably my favorite Pixar short, which is Small Fry, which is a Toy Story spinoff. And it is so funny.
It's great. He has done a lot of awesome stuff at Pixar.
Yes, he's done many. Yeah, if you look up his filmography, he's done a lot of great sort of ancillary Pixar stuff like Toy Story of Terror, which I'm also a really big fan of as well.
Yeah, he came to the studio. His first movie was Toy Story 2. And yeah, for a long time.
But he wasn't a director on Toy Story 2, right?
No, he was an animator on Toy Story 2. Right. He animated on, we talk a little bit in one of the episodes, One Man Band. He's just been a really kind of a force of nature over there. He directed Bernie, which was a short for Wall-E. He co-directed Finding Dory, and Lightyear is his big feature debut, and it's terrific, and it's on Disney Plus now, and yeah, he's the best.
Yeah, and if by any chance somehow it comes back to IMAX this year, then you should definitely go see it in IMAX, because that's the way to see it for sure, as we talk about.
Yeah. Well, anything else, Charles, or do we just need to jump into it?
I think you should tell us who brought us this episode, Drew.
Well, Charles, funny you should say that, because this episode is brought to you by Jeremy Dillon and his podcast, My Favorite Album. I think he would still like for us to remind people that he recently had Eddie Hamilton on the show for a really great chat.
That's a great chat.
So go check that out. This episode is also brought to you by John B. It is brought to you by Elvis Ripley. And it is also brought to you by Suchet. So thank you to everybody for making this show happen. If you want to become a sponsor for the show, go to patreon.com/LightTheFuse and sign up there. But we'll remind you about that at the end of the episode as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. Part 1 of Lightyear the Fuse now. This is a very special episode of Light the Fuse. We're doing something different. This is Lightyear the Fuse. And I have been pitching Angus and Jeremy this for several months. They both said we won't be on until after Tom Cruise shows up. So now that finally happened.
They probably thought that was never going to happen. Little did you know.
So now we're here. We are talking to Angus MacLane, co-writer, director. What else? What else did you do in this movie? Voice of the robot.
I did some voices. Yeah. Hello, Drew. Hello, Charles. It's nice to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller. In fact, I think this all started because I was in an interview in the height of COVID, we had a long lead press day, and I'm doing a lot of press with the producer, Galen Sussman, and all of a sudden I get interviewed, like interviews come every 5 minutes, and then Drew, you showed up, and I recognized your voice. I was like, "Do you have a podcast?" And you're like, "Yeah." Is it the Mission Impossible podcast? Yeah. And then a friendship was born.
I will say that Angus went into kind of a fugue state. You kind of like, you had to close your eyes and kind of, you kind of entered the celestial plane, and that's when you recognized
I don't think I've
just who you were talking to.
I don't think I've exited the celestial plane until now. With me as always.
Until now.
Let's introduce our second guest.
Yes, Jeremy Lasky. You are director of photography, camera, correct?
Correct. Camera and staging.
Camera and staging.
And Tom Cruise's stunt double on Lightyear, which was difficult.
Wow.
It was difficult. There's a lot. People don't realize he's in the movie, and he is. And he plays one of those Zerg bots, sort of like in Force Awakens. We got all our friends to do other things in there. Yeah.
Wow, you heard it here first.
It was all Angus's idea.
I think that's
really
the only place you're going to hear it. Just legally, we try to keep it on the down low.
Well, we wanted to talk to you guys because I know you were both inspired by Mission Impossible going into this film, correct or no? Angus is kind of giving me
no, I'm not giving you a fan. Absolutely. I mean, I think I like Mission Impossible a lot. I don't like it on the level that you both seem to, on the level of commitment. Not that I like it less, but like I haven't turned my love for Mission Impossible into a multimedia empire the way that you both seem to have done. No, I mean, I think for me,
it's never too late, though. Also,
well, how many Mission Impossible podcasts can there be? I mean, for me, the big thing was I enjoy. I like Mission Impossible. I came to Mission Impossible from the reboot. What was it? The one that was in the 80s, that TV.
The 80s show.
The 80s show, when they were going to have a writer's strike, and so they just reused the old scripts, and then, it was with a new Peter Graves and a new cast, and I really liked the show at the time, and so I was thrilled when it finally was made into a film. And I think that this series is really the most fun kind of movie. It's a movie I look forward to, and I'm excited for the next two. Again, not as much as you two, but I love that the energy that you have for the films is so infectious, and it feels really true. And that's one of the nice things I like about the podcast is how positive it is and how intellectually curious it is about the process. So much of offshoot media is weird criticism and negativity, and so the fact that you're coming to it from love is really it shows how you've been able to sustain it for almost 300 episodes. I said 300 because I don't actually know when we're going to get inserted in here, so that just gives you some leeway.
The answer might be never, I think. But I think in addition to what Angus is saying, I think we both came at it from a love and certainly a respect for Christopher McQuarrie and how he goes about making movies and how he thinks about making action films. And having listened to him and his collaborators talk on your show was really insightful as we were prepping for this movie, especially how he builds action around a location, but he always knows what he is aiming for in that scene and doesn't want to outstay his welcome. Like there's so many little gems that we've picked up. And it's usually Angus texting me, like early in the morning saying, I just finished listening to this. You got to listen to this now. It's 2 hours long, but just make time. I'm like, okay, great. Thanks.
Wow.
That sounds like something I do. Yeah.
Did we lead to any delays in Lightyear's completion because you were listening to 2-hour podcast?
I broke my ankle, but we worked through it.
Okay, good. Well, but you guys also had a very specific experience with Ghost Protocol, right? And the watching that in IMAX and wanting use IMAX in a new way.
Yeah, absolutely. Having worked with Brad for over 3.5 years on Incredibles, the first one, and a bit on Ratatouille, we were very much excited about the film, and so we were there when it was released in the IMAX version. But the Burj Khalifa intro, I mean, how you get into it with the IMAX aspect ratio expansion was a really amazing audience moment, and it's something that I wanted to see if we could replicate, or the feeling of that for our film, and so we pursued IMAX for the film, and there wasn't a lot of screenings of IMAX, but if you saw it in IMAX, it was quite exciting. And I don't know, Jeremy, do you want to talk a little bit about how we approached the aspect ratio changes in Lightyear?
Yeah, sure. I think that the Burj Khalifa moment sticks out. When we were approaching this and talking to IMAX, we went down there to their Playa Vista headquarters and saw a screening of a bunch of their IMAX films, or sections of their IMAX films, as inspiration. We were really interested in how they handled aspect ratio changes. And I won't name the films, but certainly Ghost Protocol was one of them, and probably the best of them.
So wait, you got to see Ghost Protocol in IMAX?
Just a bit of it. We just saw, we didn't have time to watch the whole thing, and they weren't going to put it together, but we just saw that section. And
wow,
the way Brad handles that transition is very Brad and very animation, meaning the timing is impeccable. It happens at the moment you want it to. It's taking the audience someplace that they wouldn't go without that transition. They wouldn't emotionally be able to go, not to that extent. And some of the other stuff we saw felt sort of like it's almost arbitrary, or it didn't, it's like they weren't really as precise as how they got in and out of something, and it didn't capture the moment. There were a couple times when, we had kind of pre-screened, I think, before Angus, and then we brought Angus back, and I turned to Tony Greenberg, our editor, and was like, why would you do that there? Why would you open up that's not where my heart is at that moment, or that's not the wow shot. The wow shot is 2 shots later. Again, not mentioning the film, everybody works really hard. But I think that was a real, a wake up moment in a way of okay, if we're going to do this, we really need to be particular about where we do it. And we looked at our footage and we said, okay, well, we have to balance it. We want it to start in IMAX. We want it to end in IMAX. And then we've got to sprinkle it through the middle. We had about a half hour of footage that we could play with, given budget and given mostly budget and time, right? Which are kind of the same thing. So as we made the movie, we would pick sequences and figure out, well, we thought this one would work, but it doesn't. So let's not do it there, but let's do it here. We definitely knew we wanted to get into IMAX for the big hyperspace jump in the beginning, or at least when he turns on his engines and he goes during his first mission. And it was playing with that timing and with that, with the sound of that and the feel of that. Not only were we choosing which shot we would open up on, but we could control the exact timing of that feel. So if we wanted to really emphasize it, we could slow it down or time it to the music or time it to effects track, or we could do it super fast so you wouldn't notice it. There's a few that we bury just because it's not important to see it close. It's, to see it go back to 239. It just goes away. And the other thing that we technically spent time on was replicating the feel of 65 millimeter film for those moments. So if you're shooting IMAX, you're either doing the film version, which is a huge aspect ratio, or you're doing it digitally with 65 millimeter lenses, and you're shooting on a bigger sensor. So we said, okay, let's make a bigger sensor for those IMAX moments and let that dictate everything else. So the whole film that is widescreen is shot with an anamorphic lens that we develop in-house. So it has that 239 widescreen aspect ratio. It has the bokeh, where things out of focus in the background are, circles of light are elongated. They're stretched rather than round. Anamorphic has a very specific feel. There's more distortion on the edges. You get verticals that tend to bend, they curve towards the top and bottom. You get a different kind of flare light flare in the background. It tends to have a horizontal line that goes across it. And Ian McGibbon, who was our lighting DP, so my counterpart in lighting, was really into let's make that look right. Not that anyone's going to notice, but we'll notice and we'll feel cooler having done it, or at least nerdier having done it. But then all of the other stuff is shot with a larger format lens. I mean, it's virtual, but it's a larger format lens, which means you have a different aspect ratio, right? Because we're now in 1:4:3 aspect ratio for IMAX. It has a different look to the flares and to the bokeh and to the distortion. It also, as you get larger in your sensor size, it changes how you perceive space. So we found we could have wider shots where the foreground and the background did not feel so far away from each other. If you shoot with a wide lens, or if you shoot with your iPhone, which is a super wide lens, and you put it close to somebody, their nose is big, their ears are small, and people in the background, you could feel like a whole crowd behind you, right, in a selfie. But as you go up in sensor size, you still get this wide feel, but it doesn't distort in that way. So it was super handy filming in cockpits and things like that. It just looks different. So like, let's honor this. So all the IMAX footage was filmed with a larger sensor virtual camera, and then we cropped out the center for 239.
Wow.
So if you watch the 239 version, you'll see a difference in the way the image looks. If you really go and pay attention, you can kind of tell what was in IMAX and what wasn't, even if you're just watching the straight widescreen version.
Well, and there's a moment that is a direct callback to the Burj curtain raiser, right?
Yes.
When she's about to go on the spacewalk, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that is a wonderful
I just have to interrupt here and say, like, after the explanation, the look on your faces, it's exactly like the Raiders of the Lost Ark moment, you know, when those two guys, William Hootkins and Don Fellows, come and talk to, is it Don Fellows? Yeah, come and talk to Indy, asking him, you know, if a little bit about the Ark, and they're like, well, obviously we've come to the right person, and they realize they're not wasting their time. It's too bad. No, you can't see that. Yeah.
No, well, I mean, we both saw it in IMAX. We went to Topeka at 11:35 a.m. and saw it, the one screening that was available in the United States. No, we both saw it at City Walk, right, Charles? You saw it at City Walk, right? Which is an amazing theater.
So it's the full 1:4:3 I saw.
Oh, great.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, so does that 1:4:3 version live on anywhere? I mean, because now, you know, TVs they only go to 1:7:8. That's the standard size of a TV. So there's no way to see, just like same with Ghost Protocol, there's no way to see that 1:4:3 version of Ghost Protocol. Is there any way to see the full IMAX sequence of the full IMAX sequences from Lightyear?
I don't know.
I can pull it up on my computer right now. I mean, it's not going to feel the same.
I don't know. I mean, it's not like the information exists. Short answer is I don't know. There's only, some 20 odd theaters in the world that are the full IMAX.
Yeah,
that's actually a separate issue. But the short answer is I don't know. It'd be nice if there was. I don't know. I guess I don't know how you'd see it again, which is a weird, in kind of a sandcastle like format where you do all this work for a format that a couple of people saw and then it's just washed to the sea. But no, I'm glad you got to see it. But I think there's something about impermanence. Or there's such a feeling now that everything is accessible. Like you cannot see Led Zeppelin again. So if you saw them, like high five. So I think that's the one thing that IMAX for me is kind of exciting. Is you're like, if you saw it, and you kind of missed it. There's something neat about that.
And you don't really want to see it on TV. I mean,
yeah, it doesn't have the same impact. Even when we screened it, we would review it in the theater. We would screen the full frame of the IMAX, and you had to really sit close to get that feeling. It doesn't quite. And that was in the main theater too, so it really needs to be in an IMAX theater to see it properly. Of course,
if you try to, some people have asked. Some fans have written in on Twitter and said, how can I see the 1:4:3? Can you just put it on Disney Plus and see it that way? But the whole idea of IMAX is that that extra real estate fills your peripheral vision. So if you put it on TV, you're going to pillar box the sides for the 239. You're going to letterbox the top for the 239. Now you're looking at this little thing. And then when it opens up, you're still not filling your vision unless you sit dangerously close to the TV. Which just, I can't focus.
I'm willing to do that
anymore.
I'm willing to do it.
I'm sure. I mean, maybe
I think we all grew up you sitting dangerously close to the TV. So.
Yeah, that's why I wear these glasses now. See, so yeah, I think Angus is right. It's like this was a really special thing that was like, I think for the people that got to see it, a really unique experience. And now, maybe one day when we all have giant IMAX screens in our homes or on our headsets, our VR headsets, we can try it again.
If only there was a awards campaign coming up for your movie that we could maybe put it back into IMAX screens. But that's just me.
That's very generous, Drew. I don't know. It turns out there's a lot of competition for IMAX screens. I just saw Rogue One on IMAX, and it was like noon. Because there were other things. There's a lot of reissues, so I think there's a lot of fierce competition. But I want to go back and just mention about the origins of the film, and just thinking about what kind of movie we wanted to make. And for me, the value of one of the values of Mission Impossible is a core idea that kind of is shared by all the Tom Cruise movies. And the Tom Cruise movie, in my mind at least, is a character who is allegiant to a paternal organization that then turns its back on our hero and is accused of a crime he didn't commit, or has to do the wrong thing for the ultimate good, and then but only to show the paternal character at the end that they were actually in the right. So part of the DNA of that idea of wanting to have a character who is very allegiant to an organization and has to make the big choice to break from that organization for the greater good. And in doing so, you can see where, and I think all action films have this moment. There's a moment called, at least internally we think about, is the big jump. And the big jump is from Act 1 to Act 2. For our movie, it's Buzz blasting off in the XL-15, having stolen the ship. In Mission Impossible 1, it literally is a jump outside the fish restaurant. That kind of, that big, a lot of times, oftentimes it's a vertiginous jump. In The Fugitive, it's literally Richard Kimball jumping off the dam. So that there were clues like that in a variety of action films. And then looking at all the Mission Impossible movies, you see that there is usually a heist, and the heist is categorized as easy in, hard out. Usually it's like the characters in the heist, and this is not just Mission Impossible, but they do it quite a bit, where it's actually not hard to get into the thing, but once you get in there, you're stuck, and then you got to find a way out. And that's certainly Burj Khalifa is that way. The Langley situation is that way. And for us in Lightyear, it was the cone sequence was our easy and hard out, where it's not an homage, or it's not like a beat for beat retelling, but it's more like recognizing what are the flavors in the movie and these scenes that you would want to have in the film to give you that sense of this kind of action film. What are the elements that you want in it? And it was interesting to break down the Mission Impossible movies and see how many set pieces there are. First movie, there's like 3 of them. And then the Fallout has 47, 48 action sequences. So it's been quite a ramp up. No, it's just interesting to see. I mean, so there's a lot of clues to what works in many movies, and that as part of our research project, we looked at a variety of films, and certainly the Mission Impossible series was part of that.
Obstacles too, right?
Yeah, I mean,
lots of obstacles.
Yeah, you want to have the character losing until they're not. You want to have the character trying. I think that one of the things that Tom Cruise is really good at is you see him, the anguish, you see him fighting. And that was the big thing that Brad pushed us on Incredibles, was he wanted us to look at actors that were showing their frailty as they were trying their best to be successful. I'm paraphrasing, but basically, so it's like what was when Connery was in Goldfinger and he felt like it looked like he knew he was going to die, like that sense of death that in Last Crusade Harrison Ford projects when his hat falls off and he looks over the canyon of the Crescent Moon. Or I don't think that's the canyon of the Crescent Moon. That's actually where the Grail is. Anyway, the point of it is, it's instilling in the characters a feeling like that they are aware of their own mortality is something that I think Tom Cruise does really well. You can see it really highlighted in Ghost Protocol, like in the scenes like when he escapes from the hospital bed, you know, when he actually lands and he has that look on his face that's like, I can't believe I actually did that. So that to me is a big inspiration as far as what kind of movie and what kind of tone and what the audience wants out of that.
Did you get any feedback from Bird on this?
I mean, he was always very supportive. You know, he was working on other projects during this film, and I've been fortunate that Brad has been a bit of a mentor, as he is to many of us, and was really cool. Like, I'll just tell you, on like a Mission Impossible type thing, while I was working on a short film in Vancouver, I did get to kind of visit with Brad in the middle of his shooting of the Vancouver segment of Mission Impossible, and he took time while he was in the heat of it to, you know, kind of give me advice on directing or whatever. And that the kind of generosity that he shows like his crew is really, really incredible. And it's I don't know, I think that's why his crew love him for it. But so it was neat. I didn't get to go to the set. I was in the same city at the same time they were filming Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, and I know that counts for a lot here on the Light the Fuse podcast.
Yeah, I mean, that's what to use a journalistic term, that's called burying the lead, Angus. That you went and met with. You met with Bird while he was making Mission Impossible.
So you could think of it like I talked to him in the evening, and in the morning he talked to Tom Cruise, which again would have a lot more weight if you hadn't just had Tom on for your 200th. But
I know. Well, now we can bring him up. Did Brad Bird talk to you about Angus's short film while making Ghost Protocol?
Yeah. Somehow you're going to link Teddy Newton into this. I can tell. Yeah.
We've had Teddy on. He was wonderful.
Yeah, Teddy is wonderful. He's
what a guy.
Very, very talented. He's a wonderful person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for those that don't know or care, Teddy was the voice of Minnie Buzz in the Toy Story tune Small Fry. So just one of the many.
It's his actual voice. It's not put on. It's his real voice.
No, he does a little bit. He gooses it a little bit. Yeah, it's a little higher like this. It's a little goes up.
Little Buzz is maybe the most iconic Toy Story character.
Oh my god, I love Little Buzz.
Minnie Buzz, yeah.
You guys also are doing something, you know, that every Mission Impossible has to do, right? Which is sort of recontextualize a franchise or a property that people have a familiarity with. So maybe you can talk about that.
As far as like,
Well, because I mean, yeah. I mean, how do you approach that? How do you make sure that? I mean, I'm sure it was a insane tightrope walk to do. So.
Well, you only have the biggest challenge in a weird way is that you only have 90 minutes. So that the 90-minute, like, that's just what the budget will allow, what the you know, you have only so much time, and then you got to think about what action films are 90 minutes. And it really boils down to one. And that action film is Commando. Commando is 90 minutes. Because very quickly, Alyssa, hopefully this is a spoiler warning. Alyssa Milano is kidnapped, and then General Kirby is there. General Kirby shows up first, and we hear about how amazing John Matrix is, and then because it's a revenge story or a kidnapping plot, it's so quick to get into it and to get out of it is 90 minutes. So you have only a finite amount of time to tell your story. And then you're also world building with Buzz, and you're dealing with him as an iconic character. And the other big challenge is Buzz is not a main character in the Toy Story films. He's a side character. So you're going to have to flesh him out and make him more than just a caricature. If he's the main character and he's just this kind of do-gooder, uptight space ranger, it's fine for a while, but then you start, it would wear on the audience for that kind of thing. So we needed to figure out a way to flesh out and make his motivations and his character clear about the why of what he's doing. And that's really where these kind of things began. The time dilation thing was one of the first, that's where we knew we wanted to go with the story, but then the how, like, why is he doing that? Because it's so crushingly depressing to do that job. It needed to be based around something that was gettable to the audience, why he would do that. And that's where his grand mistake, and then his need for redemption, and feeling like Buzz was a character that needed to atone, that felt gettable on a very like broad level. So you just sort of work around the problem of the chief thing with any movie is, why do I care? And usually they solve that in Mission Impossible by saying, this guy is going to get a bomb, and you got to go stop him before he gets that bomb. And then they go to stop him before they get that bomb. They are successful, but then they find out there's another bomb, and now they got to get that new bomb, actually steal that bomb, and have it allow it to fall into the wrong hands, just so they can solve the greater good. And then there's always that moment where they're like, do you realize what the stakes are? It's like, yeah, but that's our only choice. They forced us into a corner. So I'm jealous of the conventions of Mission Impossible because of the mission briefing that they have up front. They go, here's the issue. Here's what we need. And then off they go. That day at work thing is also common for most action movies. When you first meet the characters, usually you're seeing them doing their job. And that's in all the Tom Cruise movies, like Mission in Minority Report. You see him doing his job with the precogs and all that, and then it breaks. And that's one thing that was done very well in the first Mission Impossible. Is you're seeing, okay, this is what the mission would. You can kind of see what it should go like, and because we hear from the Phelps character what is supposed to happen, then that allows it to go wrong. Because usually in these things, either you have information about what's expected, or you have no information and you're just watching it happen. It's very clear. But to understand what the tension is, you need to know what the stakes are. And so it's always, I don't know, that's always a fun game of the day at work of our hero.
Right. Well, you got to do kind of a mission briefing as the robot.
Yeah, the exposition guy. Yeah, that's it, just to catch everybody. Yeah, but it's not. It's that's a post. That's like, let me explain what you just saw. So
right.
That's a kind of catch up, and even that we had that scene much longer, where you'd screen the movie and people go, well, how come they didn't know about time dilation before? And then so we had a whole scene where he's like, well, you see, because of the turnip's overwhelming mass, you you can make that scene 10 minutes and it totally slowed down the first act. And so you're always like trying to like figure out the right way forward. So it was our executive producer, Andrew Stanton, was like, just have him go, yeah, I know, time dilation, fine. Like, have him address it and move on. That's a way to kind of get over it.
We had a 30-minute first act at one point to try to get all of this world building information in and all of these things. And you start to wonder, well, is the audience going to care? And how can we take this stuff back so that we can get Buzz on his journey, make that jump faster? And it's hard because you end up dropping little things that, like in our minds that solve that problem, right? Like we answered the questions and they're like, but maybe we're the only ones asking the questions. Maybe, we've been watching this movie too long and thinking about it, and people from the crew write in and say, well, I don't understand, we're not explaining this, and it's, you kind of at some point go, yeah, but no one's asking that but us. Like, we don't need to explain it because we should be busy watching the movie, and let's just make sure we really explain the stuff that's super important. Twitter can explain the rest later.
We have a term for that. We call it a refrigerator moment. And it's a term I heard Andrew use once, where it was basically, it's after you've seen the movie and you're at the refrigerator, you're opening it up to get some milk, and you're like, hey, wait a minute. And his chief example was in Toy Story, if Buzz is convinced he's a space ranger, why does he go limp like all the other toys? Like, that makes no sense on like a world level. And if Toy Story came out today, there would be lots of YouTube videos talking about how that ruins the movie and makes it unnecessary. But I think that gives you like an idea of like, if the audience is buying a certain amount, they just won't care. And so you need to explain enough so that you can kind of get along with it. So that kind of give and take is one of the many challenges of making a movie like this.
We're back. How'd you feel about that, Charles?
Part 1 in the can. I love it. It's funny. I was all ready to tell you how much I hate them, because they saw the Burge sequence in IMAX at IMAX headquarters, which when we talked to them seemed like that was never going to happen for us. But now, since our chat with them, Beyond Fest, as part of their festival this year, is doing a few IMAX movies at IMAX headquarters, and one of them is Ghost Protocol, and we were able to snag 2 tickets. We tried to get more, but all we could get was 2 tickets.
Yes.
It sold out so fast.
Yeah.
So I was going to say I hate them, but now we get to experience the Burge sequence again in IMAX soon. We're going to have to talk about it. At the very least, we'll have to do a Patreon episode about it.
Yeah, I think Evan Schiff will be there. So
Awesome.
if you're going, please let us know. Obviously.
We'll see you and say hello.
Yeah.
It was cool hearing them talk about studying the different aspect ratio changes in other movies, and it's telling that I can't even remember any of those besides Ghost Protocol and Fallout. Like, Ghost Protocol and Fallout have awesome. Ghost Protocol in particular, obviously the Burge IMAX aspect ratio change was so mind blowing. But also the Fallout has that great one before the Halo jump.
Yes. I love that one.
And, a lot of movies don't do anything for it.
But you know what does? Lightyear.
Lightyear does, yes.
Yeah.
But only way you're going to see it is if you go see it in IMAX, which I don't know if it's going to be possible anymore, unfortunately.
It is crazy that they work for years on a version that is seen for maybe 2 weeks in an actual theater.
In very limited number of theaters.
Yeah. Just insane. But yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting how Angus he was talking about that it's kind of nice that you can't see the full IMAX 143 sequences. Like, he actually thought there was something special about it, that there's no other way to see it. We're talking about, we're lamenting it, and he was saying how great it was.
I mean, you got to have that attitude, I guess, or you'll be
driven
insane.
You're going to drive yourself insane if you. It's totally out of your control. Also, it was. I loved hearing Angus say he was jealous of the conventions of Mission Impossible because of the mission briefing. Because it's true. Like, it's true. Writing exposition can be such a pain in the ass, but when you have in Mission Impossible, you have this trope of the movies that you get to just pour out all of the exposition with this little mission briefing, and you don't have to find some clever way or like try to write it in some natural way. You're just like, here's this exposition, and we'll just lay it all out for you. So it's true. Like Mission Impossible, I think we've talked about it before on the show, but Bruce Geller, the creator of the TV show, used to talk about how they kind of had an extra act of the TV show because they didn't have to spend the first act doing the exposition, because they just did it so quick with the mission briefing. And it's interesting. I mean, hearing, obviously, if you go back to our McCory episode, he talks about, baking in the broccoli. He doesn't want broccoli in his brownies. They give you a nice broccoli side right off the top on Mission Impossible.
Right. Right.
But I've got some thank yous I should give. I want to give a special thank you to Nathan Lawrence and Jacob from Holland. Thank you to Nathan and Jacob for making this episode possible. I also want to credit our editor and mixer, Luke Burson, and I want to also credit our music composer, Kevin Blumenfeld.
Great. What else, Charles?
Well, we've got a Patreon, which you mentioned at the top of the show, patreon.com/lightthefuse. There are many different tiers you can sign up for, and that helps support the show. We do bonus episodes every week. So it's like double the show if you go over there and sign up for, we call it Light the Fuse Plus, our Patreon bonus episodes. So sign up for Light the Fuse Plus at patreon.com/lightthefuse. Also, check out merch on our website. There's a merch tab at lightthefusepodcast.com, and that'll link you to our TeePublic page where you can buy a shirt or whatever, and that supports the show. And while you're on the website, check out our episode guide and go through the show notes we have for every episode, because there's some really great behind-the-scenes goodies, visual. It's like a visual accompaniment to the to our audio, obviously, here on the podcast.
Thank you for also letting people know how podcasts work and that they are not visual.
There are
So
people
if
out there who are
anybody's
listening to the
listening and they're-
podcast and
yeah,
they're
they're
trying to
confused.
find the video of it.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of people who have asked us, could we please record the video of our interviews? And maybe someday. We'll see.
That's a hard ask for people. Some people too.
I know.
You know what I mean?
It's just so
feel
much
like
easier for us to ask people to come on the show, and then when they're a little worried about it, well, are people going to see me? We're like, no, it's just audio, and then they're relieved.
Yes. Yeah, which I don't blame them for at all. So
No.
you know,
It's nice to be able to roll up in our pajamas and record these intros, and nobody has to ever see us.
it's true. Yeah, we can't afford hair and makeup for sure. So yeah, that's a bummer. I want to remind people, Charles, too, to follow us on social media at LightTheFusePod on Instagram and Twitter. And also just to like, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. And just spread the word. Tell people about the show, because that really does matter and it really does help. So thank you guys so much.
Yes.
And we'll be back next week for Lightyear the Fuse Part 2.
Yeah, there's a lot more awesome action movie talk next week, so you got to come back. Thanks again for listening, everyone. Before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod, and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcast@gmail.com. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.